everyone. My name's Rayanne. Thanks so much for coming to Pathfinder tonight to listen to a really awesome presentation with two people that I work with very closely with my training, both on and off the bike. I think this could be a really great opportunity to hear what Dr. Mitch and Aaron have to share with all of us, what we can do to be stronger off the bike and just kind of take care of our bodies. So without further ado, I'll let them introduce themselves, but thanks again for coming. I really appreciate it.
So first of all, with this thing on, if you guys can't hear us, just raise your hand or holler. We'll try and project on that. But thanks for having us. Aaron and I are both super excited to be here and been looking forward to this for a while. So like Rand said, my name is Dr. Mitch Keating. I'm a chiropractor that specializes in sports medicine. I practice both in Junction City and up here at an office with Dr. Hadasol. 2013 kinesiology grad from K-State, so I came back to the right part of the world, I guess. I got my chiropractic degree from Kansas City, Cleveland Chiropractic up there. When I was in Kansas City, I had an opportunity to work with several sports medicine doctors in the metro that work with Elite Running Club in Kansas City, semi-pro baseball team, some of the docs that have formerly or currently work with the Royals. So I got a lot of exposure to sports medicine while I was up there. Also had a pretty gnarly ankle injury playing on the basketball team, so I became a quick, cheap lab rat, and that's what kind of piqued my interest. Post-grad, I began kind of specializing in sports med with being instructed by some of the docs that have worked with Team USA. The chief medical officer was actually the primary doctor that teaches the sports medicine course, or the sports conditioning course rather. So just a really cool opportunity to be a sponge with them.
It's right there, yeah.
Sorry.
Thanks,
Awesome.
Mitch.
Never given a Zoom lecture. So. But I do a treatment called ART, or active release, and that's really my forte. It's what puts me in front of the athletes that I work with predominantly, both at the pro, collegiate, and high school level. And I currently serve as the team doctor at Chapman High School and the semi-pro baseball team that works out of Junction City. So.
Hi, good here. There.
Yeah, right there works. Yeah, that's perfect.
We need an excellent.
Yeah. Right here. Like you said, just go ahead and raise your hand if we're not projecting enough. Just let me know. But my name is Aaron Riekenberg. Former Division II track athlete, and went into the United States Marine Corps. While I was in the Marine Corps, I started gaining a reputation for helping people run a little faster, do a couple more pull-ups, and be able to do more sit-ups in a shorter period of time. That kind of followed me through a whirlwind of different schools, and then making it from California back to Kansas, where is my home. And then from that brought me here to Kansas State University. Through that time frame, I found a methodology and a modality that was CrossFit. That brought me to strength and conditioning and some specific understandings of how muscles work, how the body functions, how to recover, and how to try to keep going to higher levels of fitness and be able to have capacity. So from that, I got very excited about strength and conditioning. Within that time period, I worked at a couple of different places here in Manhattan, and then started my own gym with my business partner, Kenny, which is where I met Mitch. Now, my personal experience with strength and conditioning has been as an athlete and as a coach. So I've been on both sides of it, and I try to make the experience one that I always wanted on both sides. At the same time, my experience with ART and chiropractic is while in the Marine Corps, I separated this shoulder specifically, and through ART and some positional work, I did not have to have surgery on it, and I've been able to have full utilization of this shoulder while doing CrossFit. Those of you that know anything about that, that's kind of significant, and or strength and conditioning and or Olympic weightlifting. So any specifics can be covered later.
So tonight's focus, we have really three goals that we want to talk to you guys about in regards to empowering the athlete, empowering the season and the off season that you guys are in. cyclists. I was told before I come that you can't use the term hikers because there's no leather. Bad joke by Ray Ann. But we're going to talk about just repetitive injury, briefly define that, and look at some of the risk factors and warning signs that I see clinically often get ignored. I know Aaron deals with these symptoms with the clientele that he works with on a regular basis. We're going to talk about the basics of strength training and kind of flush that out a little bit. And then we're going to look finally at the implementation of strength training and preventative care, and specifically in regards to the off-season, what it means for cyclists this time of year in the Midwest. So, any questions before we get started? So, you have to help us tonight do a couple things. One, Aaron and I are very passionate about working together to promote health and wellness in this community. We want our athletes that we co-treat and work together to perform well and stay healthy. And so we want this to be applicable to this room, right? So if we're not addressing a question that you have, or if you didn't understand something that we're talking about, please raise your hand and ask us. We're fairly laid back. And then please help us stay out of the weeds. We're both very passionate about what we do. It's very easy for us to kind of nerd out a little bit, so we want to avoid that. Okay. So repetitive and overuse injuries. The reason why they matter is that they're the most common form. It's the most common form of injuries that we see in athletics. Oftentimes we think about a high school kid getting hit on a football field and he suffers an ankle sprain or a blown out knee, but we fail to think about the hamstrings or the calf or the rotator cuff injuries that just develop over time. They're the most common type of injury in the workplace as well. So something like 85% of musculoskeletal conditions in factories and big plants in the U.S. are caused by repetition, day-to-day overuse. And I think that's obvious, right? You think about somebody in a meatpacking plant doing the same movement every single day. But we don't think about the people that sit at a desk for 8 hours. We don't think about a cyclist going on a 100-mile ride and being in the same position and straining and using the same tissues day to day, week to week, month to month, without very much change in terms of the movement pattern or the amount of stress that we're putting on those tissues. In my opinion, and I think Aaron would agree with this type of injury is really poorly misunderstood. And I think part of that is, as a society, we let pain dictate when there's an issue, right? It's like, I've been tight for 6 months, but I didn't have the injury until I was on mile 3 of my run. It's like, well, you've had this injury setting up for the past 6 months with this chronic tightness that you can't stretch or roll out, etc. Okay? They're all over the news right now. So in 2019, ESPN put this big article out about youth athletes, in particular in basketball, just being ticking time bombs. These kids in running and in baseball and in basketball and in football are just playing year-round now. And most of us didn't do that. That's a fairly new phenomenon, and it's leading to this just recurrent issues. This is a picture of Tommy John. The number of Tommy John surgeries that have gone up in the youth baseball programs and softball programs as well is just through the roof. And the interesting thing to both of us is that that's coinciding with them trying to be preventive. You see them all doing banded work beforehand and after. They're trying to do all these programs, and we see this just not working. And so we have to get better as a community, both from a strength and conditioning side and also from a medical side, to address some of this.
So another way to think about this or look at it is, if somebody's on a weight loss journey, sometimes it gets a little frustrating because you see yourself every single day when you look in the mirror and you don't necessarily see any changes. That's exactly what's happening. You are making changes as you're running through all these. With those acute injuries, like he's talking about, it's something small that's happening over the course of time. And then you get down the road and don't recognize what's happening, the posture, the position, the tension, your inability to do the thing that you want to do. So that's kind of what he's getting at there. Understand the difference between the small thing that becomes a big thing down the road that we shouldn't ignore, that we should find ways to deal with, that we should find ways to really nip in the bud, so to speak, right away.
So by definition, the Mayo Clinic, which is considered as the top hospital clinic in the United States, or arguably one of them. And it says any type of muscle or joint injury that's caused by repetitive trauma. That's really not flushing out. It's kind of an obvious statement. In the clinic and in the office, I talk to patients about having chronic repetitive trauma that just kind of accumulates over time. You develop scar tissue and adhesions. The tissue becomes starved of oxygen, and then you start getting breakdown and wear and tear from that. This is what Aaron was talking about, the difference between an acute injury and a repetitive injury. So acute injury, we enter this cycle, you slip and fall on the ice, you land on a hip. All of a sudden your knee and hip are hurting on that side. So you get this edema or swelling that leads to this adhesion and the fibrosis and the sticking of the tissue. And then it becomes weak because you can't move it, it's hurting. And this becomes a repetitive overuse cycle. With cyclists, with runners, with the baseball athletes that I work with the brigade, it is not most often the case that they have trauma, right? They start practice in the spring, right? They're weak and tight, they're maybe deconditioned, or the cyclist comes out of the winter and they haven't rode as much and they're going to jump right back into the training volume that they were in the fall. It creates this rubbing and this friction and pressure of the tissues that then leads to this inflammation and the tearing and the crushing, and it's just a vicious circle. So you can enter it from a trauma standpoint or from repetition. Does anybody have questions on that? Does that make sense? Anybody on Zoom? Good?
No questions from Zoom yet. Yeah.
Can they hear okay?
Yeah, they can all hear.
Right. So some signs and symptoms, and I'll let Aaron kind of start with this because I think both of us see similar things, but we also see different things kind of in our respective settings.
So signs and symptoms, repetitive. Typically, I start warming up, something doesn't feel exactly right, or maybe I just jump on the bike, start pedaling over, and as I'm turning over, it's like, wow, this leg is not really warming up the way I want it to. This is not necessarily happening. That hip flexor feels funny, low back, it's just, something feels right. I keep having to push back on my handles. You're looking for things like the pain, the stiffness, the tightness, the swelling, something's not right, right? Something that is impeding my ability to run through these positions or turn over at the rate I would normally turn over. Okay? Not necessarily climbing, but it feels like I'm climbing. Like, why is that happening? Right?
Yeah, and we were actually just talking about this this week in regards to a member of the gym who's had the same recurring knee issue for the last 3 years. That's not normal, right? A high school athlete that blows out the same hamstring 3 months into the track season every year. Oh, doc, I heard it every year. I just need to put it back together. It's like, those aren't normal signs and symptoms, but we accept them as normal, right? It's like, oh, my shoulder's hurt for 10 years. It's just going to hurt every day. Those are some sneaky signs beyond pain and beyond a limited range of motion that we see. I think the other thing, and Aaron probably sees this more than I do, is that we have an athlete show up and it's like, you know, doc, I was practicing the other day. I cut on my route. I'm going to the left. It felt great, right? I felt explosive. I had no power. But when I went to the right, it just felt funny. I felt slow. I couldn't turn. And that athlete complains of that for a week or 2 weeks. It's like something functionally is off, right? Something that a tissue is wore out or a joint is irritated underlying, and that's the precursor to some of these more major repetitive injuries. So the risk factors, and the top one's sad for all of us, because each year it gets a little worse. But the biggest thing that I see is this move from sedentary to active. And that's part of what we want to talk about tonight, is that when we change our training routine, right, our risk of injury increases coming out of that. So for NBA players, they get done with NBA finals. Most of them take some time off to recover. But as they go through training camp, part of the reason training camp is there is to get some of these injuries and issues kind of out of the way as they recondition. Most of us have issues from doing too much, too fast, after doing too little, too long. And that part doesn't matter what age we are, right? The high school kids that I work with are just as bad about it as I am. One Sport Athletes, the basketball article with ESPN, that's a no-brainer. I'll let Aaron talk about some of this stuff because he is the expert on that.
So lack of periodization. Does anybody know, everybody, periodization or periodized programs, basically taking, starting at a specific point that's achievable with very low training, and then stair-stepping our way across this longer period of time, right? So having times where there's high intensity, high volume, coming back down, so that we can gradually bring ourselves all the way back up. So lack of periodization typically looks like, let's jump in and go 150. Like, let's do it right now. It's like, well, let's not, because we're not ready for that. But let's have the ability to work our way back up to that, so the tissues, the muscles, the joints themselves can handle the load as we progressively get there. Progressive overload is that term for periodization. Super important. The muscle imbalances are something that we have a tendency to get into a position where maybe, hey, I'm jamming really, really good down, but I'm not necessarily able to pull up as much. So I'm not getting enough out of the backside of the leg. I'm getting a lot from my top side. I'm feeling pretty strong on my ability to push down. Then all of a sudden, now I got this little nagging knee thing that's going on, right? It's because sometimes we create an imbalance between, hey, I'm overutilizing the top side of my leg and underutilizing the pull of the bottom side of my leg, okay? Not necessarily something that we have to continue to deal with. We can get a little bit of specific training that makes us better, get rid of those muscle imbalances, and turn that weakness into a strength on that next ride, okay? Once we finish with that, we think about old injuries. Now, those typically have to take just a little bit of our time. If we have an old injury, it has to take a little bit of our time in a warm-up so that it doesn't become a nagging, reoccurring, repetitive injury. We want to stay away from those things. We have to give them just a little bit of our attention in the beginning. Okay? And then lack of proper nutrition, I'm guessing majority of us can do a better job at this. Okay? If I asked everybody, hey, who's got a perfect diet, I'm not going to expect to see you everybody keep his hands going in the air. No judgment, no judgment, no judgment. Right? We can always do better. Okay? Water is extremely important. Now, sleep deprived. Sleep, okay. I want to put this in perspective. If you have a week of terrible eating and go out and ride at the end of the week, you could probably get away with a ride, right? You're probably not going to be setting any personal bests or personal records. But if you have a week of terrible sleeping, and then you go out and try to ride, it's probably significantly worse than the week of terrible eating. We have to remember that where we heal and where we get better, where we repair tissue is from sleeping. And if we do have any superpowers, it is with our sleep. It is our ability to recover and regenerate tissue while sleeping. Extremely important. Double, triple, asterisk, both sides of that one. If you're not doing a good job of it, you could add an hour a night and make a big difference in your overall health and wellness. So, big asterisk next to that.
Okay. So, the last one here, 2020, no one has high stress, right? I have seen more strange injuries in 2020 than I have in the last 3 or 4 years. And I think a lot of that deals with the emotional stress, right? Tissue repair. We're not sleeping well, as Aaron mentioned. We're not eating well because maybe we can't get to the grocery store as easy, or we're not going to our mom's house for Thanksgiving, so we're not eating as well there. But the other part of that is stress leads to changes in daily routine, right? So a lot of the athletes that I saw, especially in the spring when it was nicer, well, my gym's closed. I guess I'm going to turn into a runner. So you have a powerlifting athlete that now all of a sudden decides that they're going to run 5 or 6 miles a week beyond what they're used to, and they get different types of. Or, I've had people go from an active job that they had low stress because they're moving the whole time to maybe at a desk job where they're sitting and they have different requirements or different deadlines that they have to meet. The stress is a little bit higher. They're more sedentary. They get bigger issues with repetitious injuries. This is just a list of, and I'll kind of step back so you can see, this is just a list of kind of some of the clinical findings that I see in the office. Some injuries that result from repetition. I think some of the interesting ones that we don't think about are disc issues. Spondylosis is just arthritis, but I'm sure we've heard of most of these, right? Achilles, golfer's elbow, stress reactions or stress fractures, Carpal tunnel can be a big repetitive injury for people that type, right? They're in the same position all day. That's a really good precursor for developing carpal tunnel syndrome. But a lot of the disc issues that I see in practice are not, I bent over, I pulled 300 pounds, and now I have an issue, right? It's, I bent over to tie my shoe in the morning, and I heard a pop. Well, there's nothing dangerous about this movement. You should be able to do that all day, every day. But if they sit at a desk 8 or 10 hours a day in this position, and they stress all of the material on the backside of their back, including the disc, and they load it just off one morning, you can blow out a disc and have a herniation on it. So I didn't list any real cycling type injuries on here, but you guys see repetitive injuries in cyclists that are just like textbook.
Well, I mean, this could be a good opportunity for Ray Ann maybe to talk about her injury, which is what kind of led to inspiring this whole presentation. I mean, hers is definitely a repetitive use injury. Ray, do you want to talk to that?
Well,
Maybe
check all the boxes.
come up front.
Oh,
Yeah, you got Zoom people. To talk.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, like Aaron touched on a lot of things that check a lot of boxes. For me, like overuse, lack of sleep, muscle imbalances, things like that I had a lot of medial issues. My knee, my inner knee, like especially the pes answering tendon, right? Tendon. I'm not the doctor here. And so yeah, a lot of what Aaron touched on like really checked the boxes for me. But I think like a cyclist, probably knees are going to be the most common overuse injury that we see. Does anyone else have anything to say about it?
Yeah, that would be the one that jumps off the page for me.
Yeah.
Would be IT man first and foremost. But yeah, knee injury.
Yeah. But yeah, so
we may call on you later.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Any shoulders, necks, backs? Shoulders, necks, backs. Okay.
What about radiating symptoms? Anybody get tingling in their fingers from being locked in too long? Yeah. So that
Just my right
radial.
hand.
What's that?
Just my right hand.
Just your right one?
Yeah.
You know how to fix that?
Right one hand.
Take it off for a while?
Yeah.
You don't drink? Or you got bigger issues? I used to hate when my dad told me that. Yeah, I need work on it. He goes, "Well, I'll just put you in." Yeah, I do see a lot of ulnar or pinky radiating symptoms coming from cyclists because of the position that they're in on the bike, depending on how they have the handlebars set up. If they have a longer race than they're used to, you can get entrapment in there. So that's another really common one. Anybody have hamstring or quad issues? They get worse as the season progresses. Increased tightness that you can't get out. Right hand. Yeah, that would be the other one I see. So I think this is a good slide because I think we view a lot of these as, it's an acute traumatic thing, right? Stress fracture, we probably understand that it's the stress that we put on it, but a lot of these other things, we view it as one incident or one day that I really did it when it's really not. So, turn it over to him.
So what do? Invest, train, commit to prevention. So as an athlete, it's unacceptable to wait until symptoms occur, right, to do anything about it. If you have the opportunity to see the injury coming and do something about it, obviously, hey, the crosswalk, there's a hole here, I'm not going to step in that hole, I'm going to sidestep. Not all injuries are as easy to see as objects in the road or as impassable objects that we can either go around or go through. Obstacles as injuries become for our training. An obstacle, something in our path, something in the road, something in our way. Okay? The amount of money. Oh, yeah, that's a good one. So there are tools that you guys use for all of your cycling, and the primary one is your bikes. You're continuously trying to find the thing that's going to give you the biggest edge, right? So I don't own a bike that is more than a specific dollar amount. Now, I don't know if it's bourgeois or weird for me to be asking people how much their bikes cost, but I've heard lots and lots of things down the road that people will spend as much as what you could buy a medium-sized vehicle for, and they would basically have that for the vehicle. So the question is, who here in this room has invested into their body as much as they have invested into their bike? And you're the primary mover of the instrument, are you not? Maybe we got one, we got two, we got one, two? No? Inside joke? Cool. We'll do
When we get our new knees.
There you go. Are they on back order because of Rona? Yeah. So the thought process there is you're the primary engine behind this bike, and you're rebuilding the chassis, doing all of these other pieces to the vehicle, but you've never overhauled the engine. You're not fine-tuning and going through and looking at making sure that everything's firing on all cylinders. So you're taking an amazing sports car and putting a Prius engine, right? Not that I have anything against Prius. Maybe I should have used a Rabbit, moped, something like that. That's in there, right? We can make adjustments, and we can make that better.
Fresh off his bubble championship, LeBron spends $1.5 million out of his $100 million annual earnings with Nike in his contract just on maintenance of the bike. And, for him, that's 1%, right? I think if you guys took 1% of your total bike cost, the money that you put in to maintain your bike, and if you invested it into better nutrition or changing weightlifting or doing some sort of self-care, that your power output, your performance, and your injury prevention at the end of the year would be night and day. LeBron's 36, and he's still considered one of the top NBA players, one of the top basketball players in the world, not just in the NBA. Aaron mentioned some about periodized training earlier, but I'll let him kind of talk a little bit more about how this starts applying to just off-season training with the athletes that I work with.
Does anybody currently train in a gym or outside of just Ryan? Couple of hands. What do you do?
As a personal trainer, I go 3 times a week.
Awesome. 3 times a week?
Nice.
Yep. Work out in the gym. Any trainer or just kind of follow a program on your own? Internet study.
Anybody do any online stuff? I know that got really, really big with the
Like group classes.
yeah, or like follow yoga track or something like that.
Yoga. So with specific periodization, you would have the ability to periodize your training, especially in the off season. So you could work to increase your overall strength. Doc hit on power output, right? And in cycling, power output and being able to sustain power output and work capacity is going to be the big part, all right? Your work, force times distance divided by time. If you are stronger and have a better power output, your ability has now increased. You can ride at a faster rate with lower effort because your power output is significantly higher. Your ability to do work has increased. This is my favorite way to make athletes more athletic, to increase their power and increase tensile strength of their muscles by way of a method that I like, made popular by a guy named Hal Dietz for our internet people. Triphasic training is his book specifically. The next slide. So what he does is he boils down the muscle contraction into tempo. All right, and tempo is a rate at which a rep is done. That's all we're talking about. So I'm going to take one example because every single one of you did it while you sat into your seat, a squat, dropping into a squat. So the tempo of the squat, first portion of the tempo would be the downward portion. The downward portion, they still see me? Yep. Cool. Good. The downward portion or the eccentric phase, which would be the bottom part. So as I am traveling down, okay, that is our eccentric phase. Okay. Now let's think about what we're doing on a bike. Continuous use of a joint. Continuous manipulation of a joint under tension. If I'm not trying to wear out my knee because I don't want to wait on my replacement to come in, we could utilize a slower, time-based approach to this specific movement. Now, I can multiply said weight by the amount of time it's taking me to do that work, right? So we take that power equation we were talking about, and if I'm getting into the weeds, you got to tell me here, and flip it on its head. And I say, I'm going to take that, and I'm going to do it for longer. Now that gives my muscle the ability, okay, to get extremely strong. The eccentric contraction is the strongest contraction in your body. So by doing a negative rep or an eccentric rep, one that I'm moving slowly through good position, is going to allow two really great things to happen. One, the muscle is going to pull really hard at the connective tissue. Two, the connective tissue is going to pull really hard at the bone. What happens when that happens? New collagen fiber is stimulated and released, strengthening the connection from the muscle to the connective tissue and the connective tissue to the bone. All right? Making our joints stronger. The next piece is that isometric, holding in that bottom point. I have now stretched that muscle to its maximum point. Now I'm going to hold it there. I'm going to force that collagen fiber to go a little bit longer, and I'm going to force that muscle to hold the tension. To hold the tension in that position. So when I'm doing this, nothing compared to what I have done. This right here is easy. All day. Because I have done this to the harder point, right? And the last piece is that concentric, right? Everybody's favorite bicep curl, the shortening of the muscle, the let's ball it up, let's make it tough. You guys are already good at that, right? We want to get you better in those other areas, okay? So that eccentric contraction, that isometric contraction, that concentric contraction can all be packaged together and periodized over a week by week by week cycle and created, packaged, and delivered for you to do very, very effectively. Any questions about that? Yes.
Aaron, so do you mean, like, let's say someone was doing a squat in the gym, instead of just squat down, up, but you mean like a timed movement, like, for example, it's not just like you're just squatting up and down, but you're actually like a slow lower and a slow raise, or you hold it at the bottom, like an example for people.
So the question is, am I saying that going up and down as fast as possible is not the most effective way to squat?
Yeah.
Sometimes it is. The answer in science is always it depends, right? Yeah, it depends. You know? Sometimes it is. Okay, but for a plan where we're trying to increase that power output as much as we can, we would want to utilize a slow down for 2 weeks and then come right back up. Slow down for 2 weeks and then right back up. Then we would want to go to that bottom point, nice and smooth, and hold in that bottom point and come right back up, okay, for 2 weeks, right? And then we would want to, nice and fast, up and down. Well, hey, I'm moving a weight that is significantly, like it's what I was moving earlier, and it was really hard. Now it's way easy, right? So that adaptation time frame we're looking for is that 6 week cycle, right? Which can be expanded, but at that point, that's what we're really looking at. Does that answer your question? Okay. Are there any other questions?
I got a question for you. We haven't talked about this. I'm curious, when you see an athlete come in and they have an athletic background, right? Whether it's in cycling or in rowing or in softball, if you start adding these periodized movements and you start changing tempo, what's the biggest thing or the first thing that you see change with that?
Typically, the positioning gets better. Their power output, like we were talking about, will get better.
Positioning meaning
Active, like core positioning. So a lot of times you'll see them kind of move and they'll be a little soggy in the middle, and then you slow them down and say, nope, and then significant trauma in the second. Okay, answer.
Yeah, I was just trying to kind of understand what you see with the people that you work with. It's being the biggest difference, the quickest
Right.
change that they see.
Well, there's no one size fits all though, because it depends if you have athletes that come in with injuries and all that. So a lot of times it's just, hey, I didn't realize I wasn't using this as much as I could have been. I didn't realize that, this and this is all part of my core. I didn't realize that, from my pockets to just below my ears is all core. I only thought that it was like an apple core and it was right here. I didn't realize that I had access to all these muscles on the side here. I didn't realize I could actively kind of almost pull back in this position while I was riding and get access to my lats, and I could climb way harder at that point because the tighter I am through this, okay, from here to here, the better my muscles fire. Okay, Dr. Stuart McGill, world's leading spine specialist. You know anything about him? BackFit Pro and his business. They talk about how the tighter or more rigid you are along your midlines, the faster everything else moves. So if I'm loosey-goosey through here and I'm trying to move my foot as fast as possible, it's not going to happen. But if I lock this down and I want to move my foot, obviously I just did it a little bit faster there to demonstrate the point. But the point would be here, it will move fast. Okay? Here or in this broken position, it will not move fast. So,
Yeah. One question relating to your speed of the squat.
yes,
Cyclists talk a lot about cadence.
cadence.
And with that, especially John talks a lot about cadence. So maybe indoor training in the winter should be a slower cadence to improve your cadence. Or whatever, right?
That is a good question that I don't have the answer to right now. You're talking about specific cadence and turnover of your foot as you're cycling. And I'm talking about the slow stretch under a load that is designed to increase strength, right? So if you're riding a trainer that is designed to increase the strength, that's a possibility. I would want to look further into that to give you a better, more informed answer, because that wasn't something that I thought about. So I will look into that more, especially talking about that cadence, and I can get back. That's all right. The question for those at home, if they didn't hear it, was about slowing the cadence down. I didn't have a good answer.
So I will say, Aaron and I, we do work close together fairly often with the athletes that we treat. And so, an athlete will come to me with a specific injury, whether it's a high school kid or a collegiate athlete, or maybe it's just someone in their 40s that wants to still play ball on the weekend. Whatever it is, we evaluate that athlete and we start looking at what have you done in the past to address this? What is your strength training kind of routine, or what do you like to do? Is it online? Is it in person? Is it CrossFit? There's different training options that every athlete does for their respective sport. And so at that point in time, if that athlete has dealt with something for a long period of time, I start thinking that we have to train them outside. And I put Aaron on the spot to see if he would give the same answer that I would give. But when I refer somebody to Aaron to work with for strength training, right? And if Rayanne doesn't mind me sharing, that was where I referred Rayanne to work through some of her issues. It was the point that they need something else that I can't give them, right? And I've seen enough of that with my patients, whether it's Rayanne or somebody else, to know that this method works for everyone. Now, it is not necessarily fast. Sometimes it is. I mean, we've had clients and patients that we work with that within a couple visits, on the phone, we're talking about what we're seeing changing with them. But it's extremely
With their consent.
Yeah, they got permission. But it's extremely interesting to me that changing this tempo and focusing on movement patterns can increase power output and performance. So I'm 30. Aaron and Kenny, I've worked with them for the last 2 years. This past May or March, when COVID went on lockdown, they programmed nothing but body weight stuff for me at home because I couldn't get in the gym. So I did 6-8 weeks of nothing but body weight work, no dumbbells, no barbells, and came back into the gym, and we hit a max, and it was 30 pounds more than what I started. And I had no training equipment on, and it was better than numbers that put up at 18, which is really cool for me to experience as the patient at that point in time. So just wanted to throw some love that way, so to speak. Treatment options for these types of injuries. Biggest thing that I see, and it drives me nuts, somebody comes in, they said, I have a shoulder issue. I said, when to start? 6 months ago. I'm like, we're behind the 8 ball, right? After 3 days post-injury, the body starts laying down scar tissue. You start developing adhesions in it. So whether it's your kid gets hit and he has a thigh contusion in the football game, or you're riding on a Saturday and you feel something tweaking your calf, by Wednesday of that week, your body is laying down scar tissue. That laying down of scar tissue is a normal way to help heal, right? The body has to repair that tissue. But the issue that we see is that instead of the tissue laying down in a nice line that moves when we're cycling or when we're bending or when we're throwing a softball, we get this nasty net, right? It becomes this spider web of tissue in the muscle that then restricts my range of motion. It increases my risk of injury or re-injury, and it decreases my overall performance. So the biggest thing that I can say with this is if you or someone you know is struggling with repetitive injury or struggling with something that has been nagging for a long time, don't wait anymore. That makes it a lot harder. There's some really good options out here, right? I send patients for massage. Obviously, I am a chiropractor. I do a lot of dry needling. I send patients for PT. They all have their place depending on what is going on. Before I switch slides, I'll let you, if you had something to say on that.
Yeah, for sure. The other piece right here is that don't wait, right? If you're working with a trainer, you should be able to talk to them and be like, yo, I have this nagging thing that's happening right here. We should be able to get you, as trainers, to a place where that nagging slowly starts to subside. Now, obviously, it might take a little bit of research to figure out exactly what's going on, because we don't all have medical degrees from Cleveland and all. I want to make sure I didn't do it wrong. But the main point there is don't wait, communicate. Don't wait, communicate. Talk to your trainer. Talk to whoever it is that's writing your programming, your periodization, and figure those things out. Because it could be that, hey, you're riding a little too much after you do your squat. Like, hey, maybe we should trade that squat day to a different day so that you're not just completely taxed when you're doing that. We just need to repair some of these things. We need to look at where the volume's at. We need to spread it throughout your week so that you're just not wrecked on like 3 of those days. And you try to come in and do a really good job on this ride when we just blew you up in the gym. Like, that doesn't make sense. All right, let's train a little smarter. Let's train as hard as we want. All right, and let's keep the results where we want.
So, like I said, these are all things that are viable for treatment of repetitive injury. I'm a little biased, but in my opinion, there is nothing out there that I've come into contact with that trumps ART for treating repetitious injuries in athletes. ART, it's kind of funny. It's how Aaron and I met. When I started working up here, I came in with an ART polo, and somebody referred me to go to Conza and just meet him. I walked in. Aaron goes, "You do ART?" Yeah. He goes, "I'll see you tomorrow." And we've been friends ever since.
Stack a business card.
Yeah, here. Yeah. But ART is something that I became exposed to in chiropractic. So, hurt an ankle. I previously tore this right ankle in high school, so it was a second tear for me. Like I said, I became a chief lab rat for the university, so they did a research study on recovery. My first treatment, I was 6 weeks in, or 6 weeks past the injury, and I was maybe 20% better. I could not walk on it. I could not run on it still. And Dr. Qualls, took me into the clinic. He did a bunch of ART on my ankle. It did not feel great, but I got up and I was 60% improved on it. And after that, I was like, that's where I'm going. And that's the training that I'm kind of attaching to, so to speak. ART is effective, in my opinion, because of the specificity of it. So it's developed by a doctor out of Colorado Springs that has worked with the Broncos for the past 25 years. It is utilized all over the world and is regarded as the top soft tissue technique in pro sports and at the Olympic level. Every pro athlete in the MLB, NFL, as well as the Olympics, have access to ART because of the effectiveness of it. There's workplace facilities that utilize ART for cost savings. Again, repetitious injuries there as well. But the resolution of the symptoms is phenomenal. There was an article in Men's Health probably 10 years ago now that they interviewed Dr. Leahy, who's the founder. And the research that they have done shows that 95% of injuries in the athletic realm, if it's too soft tissue, resolve in 7 treatments or less, right? So they have 700 protocols to treat every individual muscle in the hand, right? So if I have an athlete coming in with a shoulder injury and they're a pitcher, let's just make it easy, right? And they're throwing, and all of a sudden they just start getting some elbow pain, right? If we put that pitcher into that position and we can feel and assess the individual muscles, we can work to break up that fibrous spider web that they've developed over the season, and then we know exactly where to rehab. We know exactly what muscles need to be strengthened and changed so that, 1, they heal from the injury, and 2, they're not going to get re-hurt, and 3, that kid's throwing smoke the next time he's on the mat. Okay? So I mentioned the effectiveness of it. Do you have any comments on ART? Aaron's had experience with that before we met.
So my shoulder was actually kind of locked in this position from it separating. Long story, but basically it got jarred. My shoulder blade got stuck behind something, and then everything just kind of went like this and it snapped back into place. So we don't exactly know what happened, but I knew that it was stuck in this position. Every time I tried to go overhead, you would see a picture of me, and this shoulder would just be jammed in this position. So you can't effectively lift a barbell over your head if one shoulder is doing whatever it wants and the other one's locked in place. So through a course of basically me trying to regain neurological control over this side, and my brother-in-law, who's also a chiropractor, does ART, basically jamming on my shoulder and elbowing and doing all of everything that I don't know what he was doing back there, but he just told me this thing called ART, and next thing you know, like, I slowly start to gain the ability back, slowly started to gain that control back. I started to find the right position. Now, it took a significant amount of me watching and that analyzing movement and watching my movement, analyzing my movement to be able to correct the positions and teach myself how to do it, right? So through that, I've understood that there's 2 things. If I do something to myself in training and I don't see anybody, I'm going to have problems with it for about 2 weeks probably. But if I have a good doc that does and understands and takes care of my muscles, and I can get in and see them after it happens, they can cut that 2-week time period typically down to 6 or 7 days. So 6 or 7 days, I might feel a little beat up, but he's going to take care of it, and I can usually be good and bounce back significantly faster. Instead of having that 2-week time period where I'm like, well, I'm going to be stubborn, and I'm not going to stop. I'm going to keep doing these things, and then it starts to spiral after that 2-week time period. It gets worse as we've already covered. Broken record, getting in the weeds. But you understand what I'm saying. Have the ability to have those resources for your injury.
Anybody have any questions on that? Yeah, go ahead.
Is it like painful? No, it's not painful.
It hurts kind of good.
Okay.
So
Just like cycling. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just like biking 100 miles. It hurts kind of good. There's a lot of people in here that do that.
It's that type 2, right?
Yeah.
Talk about that type 2? Yeah. You enjoy it afterwards.
Yeah. Yeah. I was told that was race fuel. But no, ART hurts kind of good. So if you've ever had a deep tissue massage, the sensation is similar. The difference is the specificity in the tissue. So if I'm working on a muscle involved with carpal tunnel, right, I'm going to shorten and lengthen different structures. I'm going to take tension on the adhesion, and I'm going to force the movement underneath to create that relative glide beneath the surface, right? So it's very hands-on, and it really requires the practitioner to be able to feel that and to be able to understand and apply ART to the respective sport. So if they're cyclists, they're going to move different than a sprinter, right? Still a cadence, still, that's kind of wrong. The movement pattern is the same, but maybe the structures that are under tension or that are more irritated are different regardless of the sport, okay? Anything else on that? Okay. So, any questions pertaining to your guys' training in the off season or anything in regards to sports med or training, strength and conditioning? Yeah.
I've got a comment and questions.
Yeah.
But one thing that was touched on earlier that I think a lot of people don't really think about is the importance of the core with cycling, because it's like, it's strange that your core muscles aren't really like firing necessarily in cycling motion. It's not something that you're like, doing work with, but like, that it really resonated with me how like stabilizing those core muscles to like be able to like, be a sort of a backstop or like the base for, your leg movement is, that's super important. You guys touched on earlier.
I think Aaron and I both, we have an athlete. We're standing on opposite sides of the room, right? We're in different corners. We're viewing, we're observing, and we're looking at that athlete from a different lens. And both of the corners that he and I stand in involve the core in 95 or 98% of the conditions that we treat, right? So knee, ankle, hip issues involve the core. Shoulder, elbow, wrist injuries involve the core, right? Maybe there's some weird, neck complaint that doesn't necessarily involve it, but it is very misunderstood. And I think we have to understand that being in the seated position, and a lot of you guys have really good posture right now, being in the seated position, everybody's looking around, I was kidding. Being in a seated position shuts off some of the core structures naturally if it's not done right. If you do that over the course of 8 hours, 10 hours in a day, or if you're on a bike and you're not mindful of it, you undeniably develop adhesions in that tissue. If that tissue can't move, you can't fire it effectively. They call that reciprocal inhibition or neurological inhibition, that when you go to fire that muscle, the body can't access it because it's not moving how it moves. So it just doesn't do it. Right? But I think that's dead on.
I do have the internet, so I'm sure I know as much as you guys, but I'd like your opinion. Since many of us are long distance riders, in this off season, and several people here said they're lifting weights and working out to get in shape, what would you recommend for us in the gym? Are we lifting heavy and building strength and work on endurance later? Should we be doing higher reps and building endurance? Is that all part of it? Is it a split? Do you do a day of one and a day of the other? What's your recommendation?
We have a very similar question from Derek Hammer in the chat about, with the eccentric strength training, like if you're recommending like, lightweight and high reps for that, or heavier weight and low reps on this sort of eccentric.
So back to science, right? It depends. So do you have a lot of experience with lifting heavy? You said
That's it, you yourself.
I'll say no. I mean, I lift. What I'm doing currently is I'm doing a day of low rep, higher weight, and I do a day of higher rep, more sets, and lower weights. Kind of combining the two, knowing that I'm concentrating more on the strength training right now, the higher weight strength training, and was going to work from our first races mid-March, working towards about January, start working more into the so that's where I'm at right now. I want to know. Am I right down the right road?
Okay. So if it was me, say you say, hey Aaron, I want you to train me. I say, okay, we do an assessment, we look at your movements, how you move, and we would slowly start to break into those things. Once we started to fix the little things that were problems and said, hey, I feel safe enough for you to start doing these squats. Okay. We're gonna go ahead and squat, we'll probably do a little bit of deadlifting, and we'll find some ways to continue to load the lower body. Now you gotta talk about knees, having issues with knees, so there'll probably be some things to overcome there. Specifically, we would be looking at how much volume you can handle on those knees, right? So the cool thing about the tempo reps is it becomes a multiplier, right? So if you're trying to achieve strength just by time spent under tension and having high rep, high volume, you could look at it as a formula, right? Number of reps I'm doing times number of sets I'm doing at whatever weight. So you multiply that straight through and have a number, okay? Then you have your higher rep day or lower rep days okay, with higher weight, straight through, and you have a number, okay? Now when you add tempo, every single one of those reps has been multiplied by a number. Say the number that we typically use is around 6, okay? The research shows anything over 4 seconds is great for that connective tissue and collagen fiber letdown, okay? So we go to 6 because most people count fast, right? Little bad joke. I got a couple of bad jokes. So 6 seconds is typically what we look at, all right? So you're 1, 1,000, 2, 2,000, 3, 3,000, 4, 4,000, 5, 5,000, 6, 6,000, dropping back up. This is typically done at around 80% or higher. So say I'm writing a prescription for you, you're 8 out of 10 in difficulty, and then the next week you would be about 8 out of 10 or a little heavier. Maybe you just add 5s, okay? You're doing the exact same thing. 3 sets of 3 reps, okay, with that 6 seconds down. That's 3 by 3 at 6 seconds down, okay? You do that for 2 weeks, then you would be able to have, say that would be your Monday, right? Then your Wednesday would be a day where, hey, I'm just going to come in and I'm going to move up to like a 7 out of 10. I'm just going to move quick, all right? I'm going to move nice and smooth, and I'm going to make sure that all the things and all the cylinders are firing correctly. Taking the vehicle out for a drive and make sure everything's good, okay? You would have another day that we would probably look at assessing specifically, why are those knee issues there, right? We would build that into, hey, let's try to stimulate something good happening before you go out for your long ride. So we're not trying to fatigue you. We're trying to stimulate muscles that maybe aren't being worked, right? And then see if we can get them to work on the ride. Does that answer your question? Yeah.
I think the other piece with that, and Aaron kind of alluded to it, they do a great job in the gym of evaluating movement dysfunction, right? So the question for me, if I have a patient come in and say, what do I need to do training wise? I just talked to a high school kid and his dad last night who did a cross country run. And the first thing I told them is like, we have to figure out why you're hurting your knee, right? If you have previous knee injuries, why? If there hasn't been trauma, why do you have it? Why does someone else your age not have it? Right? What is off from a movement and mechanical standpoint? What tissues are locked up? What joints are fixated? What neurological control issues do you have that is making your training not as effective as it needs to be? And some of that is kind of where this crosses over. So it's like Aaron screens it. It's like, well, why is it moving here? And we're on the phone. And with Rayanne, if you don't mind me sharing, the piece was we got her to 90% pain-free within 3 or 4 weeks. But that wasn't 90% pain-free when she was riding. So she could ride short rides. She could ride even moderately long rides without having pain. But when the intensity went up, she defaulted to previous movement patterns. And what that tells me in an office setting is I'm doing my job, but I have to pass the baton, and we have to have a conversation with who she is training with so that we can keep what we're achieving in the office when she's at mile 75 on the bike at 90% intensity, right? It does no good if I can have her at 100% for 30 miles of a 60-mile race. And so I think that's interesting. And we don't think like that. As athletes, we're just like, I'm going to work out harder. It's like, I would challenge anyone, after knowing and experiencing what I have with Aaron, I don't care if it's Aaron or somebody else, but in an off-season, somebody needs to evaluate that athlete's movement. And I think that is true, and it holds true at the youth level, at the high school and college level, and at the Olympic level. Somebody has to evaluate that athlete to see if something is off enough that they're predisposing issues down the line that's going to rob them of what they've been working on. So I think it's a great point, and it's a great question to ask.
I'm Aaron, and I care if it's me that evaluates you.
Yeah.
Little joke in there. No, that would be the first like 2 weeks of that program. Then you would trade out the eccentric portion for an isometric portion. Now, I don't have a problem like basically kind of publicizing this because I do feel fairly confident in my ability to coach you and adjust things where they would, right? So everything that we do at our gym, we throw all the workouts out there on our website every single day. It pops up. It's free. It's not geared specifically towards sports performance for cyclists, right? That would be a separate thing completely, right? So what you're trying to do is improve power output. What I just talked to you about would improve power output. Okay? Did that unravel any more questions?
There's one more question from the chat that ties in pretty well here. Angie was asking about those tempo reps. Is that a technique that can be used for other movements besides squats? Like she asked specifically about like deadlifts, leg extensions, hamstring curls, things like that. Are those also movements that can benefit from tempo?
Yes, absolutely. So tempo is a blanket statement for any rep, and the rep is just broken down to the rate at which it can be done. So you would have your it'd be 4 portions to it. So you would have the first portion, which would be the eccentric or the down phase, right? You would have the bottom, you would have on the way up, then you would have the time between the next rep. So it's typically broken down into 4 numbers, okay? You can find all of this with a pretty simple Google search. Also, for your Google search, I would triphasic Cal Dietz. I would look that up, watch a couple videos on him. The hashtag Cal Dietz School of Witchcraft and Wizardry is pretty good too. So for those of us that like to jump around. Anyway, any of those exercises can be done with tempo. You want to be careful with them though. If the core is not extremely strong, especially with deadlifts, you will start fatiguing the low back. So ensuring that we're strong through here is going to be extremely important. The leg extension and hamstring curls could work, but you will see greater benefit from doing those tempo reps at a more compound lift, like the squat, like the deadlift. We typically default to a front squat and a back squat. I can talk about that. I mean, I like to put both of those together, and or a step back style lunge from an elevated position. That's definitely going to work basically from the rib cage all the way down.
So something that requires more like full body coordination and
yeah, it's more bang for your buck.
stabilization.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to be doing the exercises, like let's incorporate more muscles because you're utilizing lots of muscles as we're riding, right? Think about your climbs. You're going to be pulling from one hand cross body to the other side. Like, let's incorporate all of those things and train those muscles together so they fire and wire together when you ride. Does that answer the question there?
Yeah. Perfect.
Aaron, when you're programming for strength, can you, in like one session, how many years have you with each program and that session? Say like, I don't know how long, right? Kind of be like 3 different lifts?
Oh, so it depends, right? So science depends. Okay. So say it's off season, and we just came off season, right? So it's similar to this time frame right now. We would probably look at something that's a little bit lighter, working on building your volume up. So maybe 3 to 5 different exercises. The first one's being primarily your compound lift, so maybe like a deadlift or a squat. And then afterwards, have some accessory work that would be geared specifically towards, hey, where am I weak in my ride? Where do I have pain? Can we bring some of that muscle imbalance back with training of some opposite or antagonist, protagonist muscles that are kind of fighting each other, right? Or maybe we're just not utilizing correctly, okay? And then from there, you would slowly start to build into a little bit more and a little bit more until we start ramping that up. And then, hey, season's around the corner, we start ramping you back down because your ride time starts coming up. So you would basically look at that peak of your athletic training in the gym being that low point when you are not able to really be outside riding because snow, ice, all of wind, those types of things happen. Does that answer your question? Okay. And I think, did they hear the question? The question was like, how many exercises would go into the workout?
I think, and Aaron mentioned this briefly, I think a lot of this stuff comes with masters, right, behind it. Like, this is what we would recommend masters, because not every athlete is moving efficiently enough to do all this stuff. And that's why I think, I find it important to screen my athlete when they come in. I have them squat, I have them lunge, I have them do some basic movements because I want to know how they move outside of the office, right? Aaron and Kenny, the other coaches at Konza, they screen the athletes to see how they move because at a time when one athlete may need 3 to 5, if you can't control one, right? If you can't control a squat, why am I working on a clean, right? And so I think there's kind of an asterisk on some of this stuff in looking at movement patterns and looking at can that athlete, are they at that level to take that next step?
That was gonna be my last point. Does anybody have any other questions? So the main point there is, who here has a riding coach? Anybody? Go ahead. Like somebody that writes the programming for you, tells you how far to ride. Nothing?
You say your wife does?
Like, so, does anybody subscribe to a place where they get their programming that says this should be a short day, this should be a long day, this should be a short day? Yeah, a couple of it. Yeah. Yeah, so some of those things, some of those programs are extremely effective at allowing for us to peak when we want to peak, right? And not be in a position of constant repetition and overtraining, okay? So ensuring that we're not wearing out things before they're ready to go, okay? So coaches can be extremely beneficial, regardless if it's me or if it's somebody that you find on the internet that you trust. The main thing with any program is that you believe in what's happening and that you want to follow that program, okay? I could write you the world's best program, but if you think I'm full of it and you don't believe a word I'm saying, it's probably not going to be a good program for you, right? I would much rather you go find somebody you believe in and want to follow, want to listen to, want to work with, and follow their program to a T, because you'll see way better results that way than halfway following mine. Does anybody have any questions? Past that. Awesome.
Anything else? All right. So, like I said, Aaron and I are we're passionate about helping this community, the athletes in this community, the people in this community, and obviously we can kind of nerd out on this stuff all day. We can stay here for next month. But here's our contact information. These are our personal emails. If you guys have questions, reach out. You know, we presented in Chapman to a group of high school baseball players and their parents, and then some of their youth coaches about injury prevention with throwing, right? We want to get good information out to this community to empower the people in it to learn more about their own health and start taking care of it. And I told a high school athlete earlier in the year, and this goes really for anybody in here, we'll never have another year where we have the time to invest in our bodies, invest in learning new skills, invest in trying new things than what we do in 2020 with all the things going on. Right? Our lives have been turned upside down. I think we need to take advantage of it. And if here I can help you in any ways, answering questions or being a resource, we're happy to do so.
I had one more question from the chat.
Oh, the late one?
Yeah, one
Just
more.
finished.
Well, I know. Sorry. Well, let's see. I don't know. Don't want to drag you way back into too much, but Angie had a question. Are there like specific core exercises that can, maybe warm you up for some of those complex movements to like help with your stabilization?
Absolutely.
What would your top one be?
My favorite is called a dead bug. You want to like angle the camera down?
Yeah.
I'll actually just kind of talk about this. Do you have anything heavy? Like, I don't know, like, yeah, let's do that, right? Let's do that. No, I was thinking something a little more compact.
I don't know. I mean,
like a box or something.
well, I mean, we've got like a backpack, and
Oh,
you
yeah,
got
I'll
your
use my
backpack.
backpack. That's fine.
Yeah.
So, right here's good.
Yep, we can see
Everybody
there.
can see. Relatively recently. Yeah, cool. So, one of my favorite ones is to ensure that we get our the muscles on our side here working for us, getting all of this to fire together. So we take that heavy or inanimate object. Usually, it doesn't have to be much more than 10 to 15, 20 pounds. If you want to challenge it, you can go heavier. You start in a bent leg position, feet flat on the ground, head's flat on the ground, shoulders are pulled down to you. So all of my spine touched into the ground right here. All I'm going to do is I'm just going to drive up on the backpack, and I'm going to bring it down. And I'm going to drive up on the backpack, and I'm going to bring it down. You'll know you're doing it right if your voice changes. Okay? I'm driving up on the backpack, and then bring it back down. Okay? Now, I'm typically going to be supporting this or pushing it into me, okay, while I'm doing that. I'm going to take this, I'm going to make that side thumb, right? I'm going to take that side thumb, and where there's no bones, all right, just below the rib cage, just above the hip, I'm going to push that into my side. Y'all can do this right now, okay? I'm going to push up, or you would be pushing out on your belly button. And then I feel that muscle fire right there on the side, all right? And then I let it back down. I drive up, and I feel it fire as I come back down, okay? So I would then do that to the other side as well, somewhere between 5 to 15 times, okay? What I'm looking for here is the ability to drive from the inside on those internal and external obliques. So the goal here is that core that we talked about earlier, right? That, hey, it's just right here on the right and left of my belly button, and it's just back here in the back that gets really sore. No. Let's turn that into a belt. Once we turn that into a belt, we then turn it into a vest. And that vest becomes body armor. So when I'm riding and something happens, I fall, whatever the situation is, my spine is so protected because the muscles of my core are all firing together. All right? So just starting off there, driving through that position, pushing in hard, and driving out, working from the inside out. That
Right. Yeah. Awesome. Thank you for the demonstration.
Can I say something on his
Of course.
dead bug presentation? How many people do a movement when you're working core that's only here? Right?
Yeah,
Who does a core exercise that's outside of it? Okay, what do you do? Okay, so twisting. Okay, what else? Rotation. Anybody do leg flips, bicycle kicks? Right? The core's job is to keep you stable. There is nothing athletically that you have to be strong in this position, right? Aside from maybe like launching a javelin, right? There's nothing athletically. All of us have to be strong in the ability to keep our spine neutral, whether it's picking up our grandkid or riding on our bike or working at our job, trying to keep the spine from getting beat up, right? So some of these more functional exercises, planking, which everyone hates. No one likes holding a plank. If you do, there's something really wrong. Dead bug exercises. You know, I talk about breathing exercises for time, right? All of these are great ideas for core, but every time I ask a patient in the office, like, what do you do for core? I do sit-ups, do Russian twists, which aren't bad exercises, but they can't be the only way we train core, because we have to have strength to resist force through the rest of our day. Okay?
Who here planks? Okay? You would plank like this, or would you
Who
plank like
enjoys
this?
it?
On the forearm, right? Okay, now I want you guys to show me if this is how you do your plank, right? Going back down again. So.
Yeah.
So when I'm to this forearm position, all right, how many of us are actively, watch the elbows, right? Watch the elbows. Actively pulling back. Now my hand, obviously I shouldn't slide, I'm a little slippery here, but I should be creating backward tension here. Now instantly, you see the body start to shake, right? I'm trying to drag my toe up while I'm pulling back with the elbow, okay? From there, I'm then driving my hips down. There's not a muscle that's not on. If you're planking and you're not feeling those muscles working, we can do better, right? Pulling back, and instantly the shake starts to happen. I can't hold this for however long that guy held it for in California for all of the veterans that have passed away. I'm not taking anything away from them. I'm a veteran myself. I just couldn't hold that position that long, right? So the goal here is to create maximal tension from here down and from here up. And it's your butt and your belly's job not to let it break in half.
Oh yeah. Right. That looks like good. That's good form.
You can hold that plank all day. Yeah, I can be here all the time. No problems. Right here. And by pulling that belly back and driving through the glutes, you know,
have the opportunity to create that tension, right? We're talking core from the pockets to the shoulders, okay? Pockets to the shoulders. So those are two. I could go on. So
Awesome. Well, thank you guys again for having us. You guys have a
Thank you
great
guys
time.
so much. Yeah.